The scent of burning lilies filled the air, lilies, my favorite flower, now reduced to ash and bitter smoke. Around me, the once pristine white tablecloth was stained a horrifying crimson, a stark contrast to the joyous celebration it was meant to host. They stood there, my own family, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and cruel amusement, as if I were a spectacle, a clown who had just tripped on stage. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crackling embers and the rhythmic thump of my own heart, a frantic drumbeat against the cage of my ribs. In that moment, the fragile threads of family loyalty that I had so carefully woven for decades finally unraveled. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from those closest to you, the ones who should be your rock and foundation, subscribe now and share your story. Let's build a community of those who understand the pain of family wounds. My name is Abigail, and for most of my life, I was the quintessential understanding daughter. The one who always put others' needs before her own, the reliable shoulder to cry on, the ever-present peacekeeper. Growing up, my brother, Ethan, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He was showered with praise and opportunities, while I was quietly expected to excel without complaint. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, but their affection always seemed to be filtered through a lens of comparison, a subtle implication that I needed to be more like Ethan to truly earn their approval. I accepted it, chalking it up to different personalities and the complexities of family dynamics. After all, what else could I do? Complaining felt selfish, and besides, I genuinely loved my brother, even if I sometimes resented the preferential treatment he received. This dynamic continued well into adulthood. Ethan's successes were celebrated with lavish parties and heartfelt pronouncements, while my accomplishments were met with polite nods and a casual, "That's nice, dear." It was a pattern so ingrained in our family that I barely noticed it anymore, or so I thought. When David proposed, I was ecstatic. Finally, something that was entirely mine, a joy that wasn't overshadowed by Ethan's achievements. David was everything I had ever wanted in a partner, kind, supportive, and utterly devoted to me. Planning the wedding should have been a joyous experience, a time for bonding with my mother and sharing my excitement with my family. Instead, it became a source of immense stress and pain. My mother, bless her heart, seemed preoccupied and distant. Every time I tried to involve her in the planning, she would brush me off with vague excuses about being too busy or stressed. I tried to be understanding, knowing she had a lot on her plate, but her lack of enthusiasm stung nonetheless. Then came the bomb. A week before the wedding, my mother announced that she and my father would be unable to attend. Ethan had booked a surprise trip to Hawaii for their anniversary, and she couldn't possibly miss it. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Abigail," she explained, her voice laced with guilt. "And Ethan worked so hard to plan it. You understand, don't you? Understand." My heart shattered into a million pieces. My own mother was choosing a vacation over my wedding, choosing my brother's grand gesture over my lifelong dream. The pain was so intense it felt like a physical blow. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand that she reconsider. But I didn't. Years of conditioning had taught me to swallow my emotions, to prioritize others' feelings over my own. I simply nodded, forcing a weak smile, and said, "Of course, Mom, I understand." But inside, a seed of resentment began to sprout, a bitter vine that would slowly but surely entwine itself around my heart. The wedding went ahead without them. I plastered on a smile, pretending everything was fine, but their absence loomed large, a gaping hole in what should have been the happiest day of my life. The person I trusted most was one of them. My own father, who had always seemed like a silent observer in my mother's orbit, revealed a shocking complicity. After the wedding, during a strained phone call, he confessed that the Hawaii trip wasn't entirely Ethan's idea. My mother had been subtly hinting at wanting to go for months, and Ethan, ever eager to please, had simply made it happen. My father admitted that he knew how much the wedding meant to me, but he didn't want to upset my mother. He had chosen the path of least resistance, prioritizing his wife's happiness over his own daughter's. That's when the last vestiges of my naive hope dissolved. It wasn't just my mother, it was both of them, united in their unwavering support of Ethan and their casual disregard for my feelings. I felt like an outsider in my own family, a supporting character in a drama where Ethan was always the star. The weight of years of unspoken resentment finally became unbearable. I was done being the understanding daughter. I was done sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of others. Something inside me had broken, and in its place, a new resolve began to form. A resolve to protect myself, to stand up for what I deserved, and to finally say, not this time. The months that followed were a blur of forced smiles and hollow conversations. I tried to talk to my mother, to explain how deeply her actions had wounded me, but she dismissed my concerns as wedding jitters, assuring me that I was overreacting. Ethan, oblivious as ever, continued to bask in the glow of his thoughtfulness, completely unaware of the chasm that had opened up within our family. He'd call, regaling me with stories of his latest adventures, expecting me to be my usual supportive self, and each time, I felt a surge of resentment so intense it was almost suffocating. I started having trouble sleeping. The image of my parents toasting to Ethan in Hawaii while I was exchanging vows haunted my dreams, leaving me exhausted and on edge. During the day, I found it difficult to concentrate at work. My mind would wander, replaying the events leading up to the wedding, searching for clues I had missed, moments when I could have spoken up, asserted my needs. But there were none. I had been so conditioned to prioritize others that I had become invisible, a silent observer in my own life. My relationship with David, which had started with such promise, began to suffer as well. I found myself withdrawing from him, unable to fully explain the turmoil that was consuming me. He sensed that something was wrong, of course, but every time he tried to get me to open up, I would shut down, afraid to burden him with my family drama. The weight of my unspoken feelings was crushing me, slowly eroding my spirit. One evening, after another strained phone call with my mother, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. Her eyes were dull, her face gaunt, and her shoulders slumped with defeat. Was this who I had become? A shadow of my former self, defined by the expectations and actions of others. A wave of anger washed over me, hotter and more intense than anything I had ever felt before. I couldn't continue living like this, suffocating under the weight of their indifference. I needed to break free, to reclaim my own life, but I didn't know how. The thought of confronting my family again filled me with dread. I knew they would dismiss my feelings, minimize my pain, and ultimately make me feel like I was the one in the wrong. But what other choice did I have? To continue living a lie, pretending that everything was fine while my soul slowly withered away. That night, I made a decision. I would confront my family, not with anger or accusations, but with a quiet determination to be heard. I would lay bare my feelings, explain the depth of my pain, and demand that they acknowledge the impact of their actions. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was prepared to fight for my own happiness, for my own sense of self-worth. I arranged a dinner at my house, inviting my parents and Ethan. I spent the entire day preparing, cleaning the house, and cooking their favorite dishes, all the while battling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. When they arrived, the atmosphere was stiff and uncomfortable. My parents exchanged polite greetings with David, while Ethan launched into a rambling story about his recent promotion. I tried to steer the conversation towards my feelings, but every time I opened my mouth, I was interrupted or dismissed. Finally, as we were clearing the table, I took a deep breath and said, "Mom, Dad, there's something I need to talk to you about." My mother sighed dramatically and rolled her eyes. "Abigail, can't this wait? I'm really tired." "No, Mom, it can't wait," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It's about the wedding, about how you weren't there." The room fell silent. Ethan looked confused, while my father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My mother, however, remained defiant. "Abigail, we've been over this. Ethan planned a wonderful trip for our anniversary. What were we supposed to do, cancel it?" "You were supposed to be at my wedding, Mom," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. "It was one of the most important days of my life and you weren't there. And it wasn't just you, Dad. You knew how much it meant to me, but you didn't say anything, you let it happen." My father opened his mouth to speak, but my mother cut him off. "Abigail, you're being ridiculous. We love you, but you can't expect us to put your life on hold just because you decided to get married." "That's not what I'm asking," I said, my voice rising. "I'm asking you to acknowledge that your actions hurt me, that they made me feel like I wasn't important." My mother scoffed. "Oh, please, Abigail, don't be so dramatic. You're always so sensitive, can't you just let it go?" "No, Mom, I can't let it go," I said, my voice breaking. Because it's not just about the wedding. It's about everything. It's about how you've always favored Ethan, how you've always made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Ethan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Abigail, that's not true. Mom and Dad love you just as much as they love me. Really, Ethan? I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. Then why weren't they at my wedding? Why do they always celebrate your successes while barely acknowledging mine? Why is it always about you? The argument escalated, voices rising, accusations flying. My parents dismissed my feelings as petty jealousy, while Ethan accused me of being ungrateful. I tried to stay calm, to explain my pain in a rational way, but it was no use. They simply didn't understand. They couldn't see beyond their own perspective, their own ingrained patterns of behavior. Finally, defeated and exhausted, I stood up and said, "You know what? I'm done. I'm done trying to explain myself to people who don't want to understand. I'm done sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of your feelings. From now on, I'm putting myself first." I walked out of the room, leaving them speechless. David followed me, his face etched with concern. "Abigail, are you okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me. "No, David," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I'm not okay, but I will be. I promise you I will be." That night, I lay awake for hours, replaying the argument in my mind. I knew I had done the right thing, that I had finally stood up for myself, but it didn't make the pain any less real. The realization that my own family was incapable of truly seeing me, of truly understanding my pain, was devastating. But amidst the pain, there was also a flicker of hope. A hope that by breaking free from their expectations, by prioritizing my own needs, I could finally create a life that was truly my own. The seed of resentment had taken root, and now it was time to cultivate it into something strong, something powerful, something that would protect me from further harm. The plan was beginning to form. The days bled into weeks, then months. I went through the motions of life, a ghost in my own home. Work was a refuge, a place where I could focus on something other than the gaping hole in my heart. But even there, the memories haunted me. I'd be sitting in a meeting, and suddenly I'd be back at the dinner table, reliving the argument, hearing the cruel words, feeling the sting of their indifference. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were filled with distorted images of my family, their faces twisted into grotesque masks, their voices echoing with accusations and scorn. I stopped eating, lost weight, and became increasingly withdrawn. David tried his best to support me, but I pushed him away, unable to bear the thought of burdening him with my pain. I felt like I was drowning, slowly sinking into a sea of despair with no hope of rescue. One particularly bleak afternoon, I came home from work to find a package waiting for me on the doorstep. It was a photo album wrapped in a familiar ribbon. My heart sank. It was from my mother. Hesitantly, I opened it, my fingers trembling. Inside were pictures from Ethan's wedding. Pictures of him beaming, surrounded by family and friends celebrating his special day. There wasn't a single photo of me. The message was clear: I didn't belong. I was an outsider, a mistake. The album slipped from my grasp and fell to the floor, scattering the photos across the room. I sank to my knees, tears streaming down my face, and sobbed uncontrollably. It was the final straw. The last vestige of hope, the last thread of connection, had been severed. In that moment, I felt utterly broken, completely alone. I had reached rock bottom. As I lay there on the floor, surrounded by the fragments of my shattered dreams, a strange thing happened. The tears stopped, the sobs subsided, and in their place, a cold, hard resolve began to form. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was done being a victim. I was done letting my family control my life. I would not let them break me. I would not let them win. I would fight back. But not with anger, not with accusations, not with the same futile attempts to reason with them. This time I would fight smart. I would use their own weapons against them. I would expose their lies, reveal their hypocrisy, and make them pay for the pain they had inflicted on me. The idea was just a flicker at first, a tiny spark in the darkness. But as I lay there, gathering my strength, it began to grow, to intensify, to consume me with its burning intensity. Plan began to take shape, a plan so audacious, so cunning, so perfectly calculated that it made me feel almost giddy with excitement. I would become the architect of their downfall. I would orchestrate their ruin, and I would do it all with a smile on my face. I stood up, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. I gathered the photos, carefully placing them back in the album. Then I took the album and threw it into the trash. It was time to erase the past, to bury the pain, and to embrace the future. A future where I was in control. A future where I was the one calling the shots. I walked into the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was no longer the same woman who had arrived home that afternoon. Her eyes were hard, her jaw was set, and her lips were curved into a determined smile. The understanding daughter was dead, and in her place stood a force to be reckoned with. I started by gathering information. I needed to know everything about my family, their secrets, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. I spent hours online, scouring social media, searching public records, digging up any dirt I could find. I discovered things about my parents that I never knew, things that shocked and disgusted me. I learned that Ethan's successes were often built on lies and deceit, that he had cheated his way to the top, stepping on anyone who got in his way. The more I learned, the more determined I became. I was going to expose them all. I would reveal their true selves to the world. They thought they were untouchable, that they could get away with anything, but they were wrong. I was going to make them pay, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. The plan was taking shape piece by piece, detail by detail. It was complex, intricate, and required meticulous planning. But I was patient, I was methodical, and I was absolutely ruthless. They had underestimated me for too long. They had dismissed me as weak and insignificant, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The game had begun, and I was playing to win. I started small, focusing on Ethan. His arrogance was his weakness, his belief that he was smarter than everyone else. He'd recently landed a major deal, a partnership that was supposed to set him up for life. I started digging. Late nights spent hunched over my laptop, tracing his steps, following the money. It didn't take long to find the cracks. Shady dealings, falsified documents, backroom payoffs. He'd cut corners, broken promises, and outright lied to secure the deal, all of which I documented meticulously. Screenshots, emails, financial records. I built a case, brick by damning brick. I created a separate email address under a false name, a burner account that couldn't be traced back to me. Using a VPN to mask my location, I started leaking information to his partners, anonymous tips hinting at irregularities, suggesting they take a closer look at the books. I made sure to include just enough detail to pique their interest, to plant the seed of doubt. Then I waited. It was a delicate game, a high-stakes gamble. One wrong move, one slip-up, and the whole thing could come crashing down. But I was careful, methodical. I covered my tracks, erased my digital footprint, and made sure I was always one step ahead. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Every time my phone rang, my heart would leap into my throat. Every time I saw Ethan, I had to fight the urge to reveal everything, to watch the smug look on his face crumble into despair. But I held back. I played the part of the concerned sister, offering words of encouragement, pretending to be supportive. All the while, I was tightening the noose around his neck. My parents were a different story. Their sin wasn't illegal behavior, but emotional abuse, of blatant favoritism. The kind that leaves no visible bruises but scars the soul just as deeply. For them, my revenge would be more subtle, more insidious. I started by subtly manipulating the narrative, planting seeds of doubt in their minds about Ethan. Casual comments about his spending habits, his long hours at the office, his increasingly erratic behavior. I played on their fears, their anxieties, their deep-seated insecurities. I knew they secretly worried about Ethan, about his ability to handle the pressure, about his tendency to take risks. I amplified those worries, fanning the flames of their paranoia. It was a slow burn, a gradual erosion of their faith in him. I wanted them to see him for who he really was, a flawed, fallible human being, not the golden child they had always imagined. One afternoon, I accidentally left a newspaper article about corporate fraud lying on the kitchen table when my mother came to visit. The article detailed a case remarkably similar to Ethan's situation. I didn't say anything, just let her read it and draw her own conclusions. Later that week, my father called me, his voice tight with concern. He asked me about Ethan, about his work, about his well-being. I played dumb, feigning ignorance. But I knew the seed had been planted. The following week, while helping my mom with some tech issues on her laptop, I installed a keylogger. It was a simple program, undetectable to the average user, but it would record every keystroke, every email, every password. It wasn't long before I had access to their entire digital life. Their bank accounts, their emails, their social media profiles. It was a treasure trove of information. I learned about their secret investments, their hidden debts, their online affairs. I discovered a side of my parents that I never knew existed, a world of deception and hypocrisy that was even more shocking than Ethan's transgressions. All of this I also saved meticulously, securely, hidden. I built a case against them too, a case based not on legal evidence but on emotional manipulation, on the exposure of their deepest, darkest secrets. The closer I got to the end, the more nervous I became. I set up multiple failsafe systems, in case they uncovered what I was up to. I made sure that everything I was gathering was being copied to other secure machines located outside of the country. I knew that if they discovered my plan, they would use everything in their power to stop me. But I was ready for them. I anticipated their moves, I planned for every contingency. I was playing chess, and they were still playing checkers. The final piece of my plan involved a hidden camera. I needed irrefutable proof of their actions, something that would leave no room for doubt. I installed a high-definition camera in their living room, disguised as a smoke detector. It was small, discreet, and virtually undetectable. I positioned it so that it captured the entire room, providing a clear view of their interactions. Then I waited. It didn't take long for them to incriminate themselves. The camera captured their private conversations, their arguments, their moments of vulnerability. It recorded their true feelings about me, about Ethan, about each other. It was a goldmine of incriminating evidence. I watched the footage every night, transcribing their words, analyzing their body language, piecing together the puzzle of their dysfunctional family dynamics. I was building a narrative, a story that would expose their lies and reveal their true selves to the world. The day they tripped up was the day the bomb was ready to explode. The day I found the video was the day everything changed. I was sifting through my mother's emails, a routine task by now when I saw it, an email with the subject line Ethan's situation. Attached was a video file. My heart pounded as I downloaded it, a knot forming in my stomach. I had a feeling this was it, the smoking gun, the key to unlocking everything. The video was shot from my parents' living room, the same room where I had installed the hidden camera. It showed my parents and Ethan sitting together, their faces grim, their voices hushed. They were discussing his failing deal, the one I had meticulously sabotaged. But then the conversation took a turn. My mother started talking about me. "She's always been jealous of Ethan," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's trying to undermine him." My father nodded in agreement. "We need to do something about her," he said, his eyes cold and calculating. "She's becoming a threat." Ethan chimed in, his voice laced with anger. "She needs to be taught a lesson," he said. "She needs to understand that she can't mess with us." The blood in my veins turned to ice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own family, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, were plotting against me. They saw me as an enemy, a threat to their carefully constructed world. And then my mother said the words that would forever haunt me. "Maybe it's time we took care of Abigail," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe it's time she disappeared." The video ended abruptly. I sat there, frozen in shock, my mind reeling. They wanted to make me disappear. They wanted to silence me. They wanted to end me. That was their biggest mistake, thinking that I wouldn't fight back, thinking I was weak. The rage that had been simmering inside me for so long finally erupted, a volcanic eruption of fury and determination. The plan had to accelerate. The game was no longer about exposing their lies and revealing their hypocrisy. It was about survival. I had to act fast before they had a chance to carry out their twisted plot. That night, I set the trap. I knew they were planning something, that they were watching me, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. So I gave them what they wanted, an opportunity. I started acting erratically, withdrawing from my friends, neglecting my work. I made sure they saw me, planting the seeds of suspicion, letting them think they were getting closer to breaking me. I even started leaving my apartment unlocked, inviting them in, daring them to make their move. Then, I sent an anonymous email to Ethan, pretending to be one of his disgruntled business partners. The email contained a link to a secure website, a website I had created myself. The website contained a detailed account of his shady dealings, along with copies of the falsified documents and backroom payoffs. I made sure to include a warning. If he didn't come clean and confess his crimes, I would expose everything to the authorities. I knew he would panic. I knew he would turn to my parents for help. And I knew they would take the bait. The final step was to lure them to a specific location, a place where I had complete control. I chose an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place that was isolated, remote, and far from prying eyes. I sent them an anonymous message, telling them that I had evidence that could destroy them all and that I was willing to negotiate a deal. I gave them the address of the warehouse, along with a specific time and date. I knew they would come. They couldn't resist the opportunity to silence me once and for all. The day arrived, a dark and stormy day that seemed to mirror the darkness in my heart. I drove to the warehouse, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. I was walking into the lion's den, but I was ready. I had spent months preparing for this moment, anticipating every possible scenario, planning for every contingency. I parked my car a safe distance away and approached the warehouse on foot. The building was dilapidated and run down, its windows boarded up, its walls covered in graffiti. It was the perfect setting for a final showdown. As I reached the entrance, I took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy metal door. The warehouse was dark and cavernous, the air thick with dust and the smell of decay. I could hear the sound of rats scurrying in the shadows. I walked deeper into the warehouse, my senses on high alert, my eyes scanning the darkness. And then I saw them. My parents and Ethan were standing in the center of the warehouse, their faces illuminated by a single flickering light bulb. They were armed. My father was holding a pistol. Ethan had a crowbar. My mother was clutching a knife. They looked like characters from a horror movie, the moment of truth. Well, 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 I said, my voice echoing through the warehouse. Look who decided to show up. So nice of you all to make the trip, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, echoing off the cavernous walls of the warehouse. My father's face contorted with rage. He raised the pistol, his hand shaking slightly. You little snake, he spat. You thought you could outsmart us. Ethan stepped forward, hefting the crowbar like a weapon he knew how to use. We gave you everything, Abigail, and this is how you repay us. My mother's eyes were the coldest I had ever seen them, a chilling void of emotion. You were always a disappointment, she hissed, a stain on our family. They advanced toward me, a united front of hatred and malice, but I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, a faint smile playing on my lips. Did you really think I came here unprepared? I asked, my voice dripping with false sweetness. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control. With a click, the warehouse erupted in light. Floodlights blazed to life, illuminating every corner of the space. And then, the screens flickered on. Giant screens, positioned strategically around the warehouse, displaying the video I had found on my mother's email. The video of them plotting against me. The video of my mother suggesting I disappear. Their faces drained of color as they watched themselves, their words echoing through the warehouse, amplified by the sound system I had installed. What is this? My father stammered, his voice barely audible. You think this will stop us? Ethan roared, charging toward me, the crowbar raised high above his head. But before he could reach me, the second wave hit. The screens shifted, displaying a live feed from my burner email account. An email being sent to Ethan's business partners, detailing his fraudulent activities, complete with falsified documents and financial records. His face crumpled, the arrogance replaced by a look of sheer terror. He stopped dead in his tracks, the crowbar falling from his grasp. My mother gasped as the screens transitioned again, this time displaying her private emails, her secret investments, her online affairs. Her carefully constructed facade of respectability shattered before her eyes. The final blow. The screens flickered once more, displaying the keylogger data I had gathered. Bank accounts, passwords, social media profiles, everything. Their entire digital lives, laid bare for the world to see, or at least for them to see in that moment, knowing what was about to happen. My father, realizing the depth of his exposure, let out a guttural cry. He raised the pistol, aiming it at me. But before he could pull the trigger, the doors of the warehouse burst open. Federal agents, acting on the anonymous tips I had provided, swarmed the building, weapons drawn. Freeze, don't move, they shouted, surrounding my family. My father hesitated for a split second, then slowly lowered the pistol. The agents moved in, disarming him, handcuffing him, leading him away. Ethan and my mother were also taken into custody, their faces masks of shock and disbelief. As they were being led away, Ethan locked eyes with me. The look of hatred in his eyes was intense, but beneath it I saw something else. Fear. They had lost. They had lost everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of media attention, legal proceedings, and family drama. Ethan's business partners immediately terminated his deal, and he faced a mountain of fraud charges. My parents' secrets were exposed, their reputation ruined, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of detachment washing over me. I testified before a grand jury, providing evidence of their crimes. I cooperated with the authorities, answering their questions, laying out the whole truth. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I knew it was necessary. I had to see it through to the end. In the end, Ethan was convicted of multiple counts of fraud and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. My parents faced their own legal battles as well as the scorn of their community. Their lives were forever changed, their reputations tarnished beyond repair. As for me, I walked away. I cut all ties with my family. I changed my name. I started a new life far away from the shadows of my past. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments of regret, moments when I wondered if I had gone too far. But then I would remember the video. I would remember their betrayal. I would remember the fear I felt when I realized they wanted to end me. And I knew I had done what I had to do. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. It's a survival mechanism when those who should protect you become your greatest threat. It's not about pleasure, it's about justice. It's about taking back control when everything has been stolen from you. They thought they could bury me. They didn't realize I was a seed. They lost everything. I just smiled. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.